Hey guys, welcome to part 3 of the Sony A7V Beginner's Guide series. So what we're going to go over in this video in detail is video. I'm going to show you how to record video using the camera, and there's lots of settings and options and stuff like that to help dial in what you're doing depending on your use case. So let's just get right into it. Just to start, guys, I just want to let you know I have the camera in video mode right there. You can see the little video camera icon with the sub dial. So that's photo mode. That's video mode, and then of course S and Q is to the right, so we're just going to leave it in video mode. And I also have it in full auto mode, which is how we're going to start, but don't worry, we will cover the other more advanced creative modes as well. Now a lot of the stuff we already covered in photo mode, so I'm not going to cover it in quite the same detail. Specifically focus areas, just as an example. I'm not going to go through all those different focus areas again, like in such detail, because we already did it in photo mode, but I will cover it just briefly to show you, just in case you skipped ahead and or you're starting in video mode. So just keep that in mind, guys. All right, so here we are in video mode, and again, we're in full auto. Now you have the record button here, so when you want to start recording, you can just press that. Now just going around the screen really quick, I just wanted to show you, again, you can swipe to get rid of these boxes on the outside, and you can swipe up to bring up the function menu. Just quick reminder there. So you can actually hit record hitting this button as well, or this button here. It's up to you. Now, going around the screen really quick, on the top left, we have audio meters. And if you actually hit the function button here, you have an option to adjust the audio level right here. So you can bring this down and up, and you can see how far the green is going up. You want to make sure when you're recording video that it's not clipping. Like right now, it's getting close to clipping. If I yell, it'll probably clip, but you want to try to keep it, you know, away from the very edge there on the top, just so you have enough buffer room there in case there's something loud. You don't want to be clipping your audio. So anyways, that's what that does. So I could just click OK here. So that's what the audio bars are on the top left. Now, next to that, we have the autofocus mode, and it's currently in autofocus continuous because we're recording video. So we're going to be continuously autofocusing. The other option would be manual focus, and you can change that right here. MF stands for manual focus. So why you might want to use manual focus is if your subject's not moving and you don't want the camera like adjusting, that autofocus adjustment, you can see it. Even if it just adjusts a little bit, like you'll notice it when the more you do this type of stuff. So depending on what you're doing, you might want to just hard set it to manual. A lot of times when I'm out in the field, I will set it to manual, so this way I don't have to worry about the autofocus drifting around. Like if I'm recording a time lapse, for example, or landscape footage, or just cars driving past, the camera will grab the car and track it, you know, like automatically, depending on how the camera's set. So in some cases, you want manual focus, just so it's not shifting around. So you might think you're never going to use manual focus because you have this super sophisticated camera with this amazing autofocus, but there are use cases. And a lot of killer lenses, like cinema lenses and stuff, are manual focus only. So things like that. Also, if you're doing like macro photography, a lot of times macro photography is going to require manual focus, unless you're using that new incredible Sony lens that's really good at macro levels autofocusing. But other lenses are just straight up manual, and that's again why you might want to use manual focus. So anyways, we are in continuous focus there, AFC mode. Now to the right of that is the current frame rate, so it's set to 24p. Now, to the right of that is standby. That will change when we hit record. So now you can see it says record because it's now recording. All right. To the right of that is how much time we have left in the current recording format on the memory card. So it's saying at this current recording format, 4K 24p, I have 1 hour and 52 minutes on card 1. On card 2, I have 2 hours and 26 minutes. So that's what that means up there, where you're seeing 1 and 2, because I have dual cards in here, as you saw in the video 1. Now, of course, to the right of that, we have the battery life. 78% is where I'm at. Now, just looking quickly here, we have a self-timer. So you can set a self-timer if you want. So when you hit record, it'll count down. Very helpful, especially if doing selfie type stuff. That's what the self-timer does. Now, we also have here Focus Map. So Focus Map is a cool feature that will assist you, especially in manual focus situations. So if we turn the focus ring, you can see when it turns clear, like on the nose there, and now on the face, that's how you know you have accurate focus. Like it pretty much goes clear. So if we focus on the background here, we'll try to get it so that fan is clear. See right there? So now the fan doesn't have any color on it. So that's how you know where the focus plane is. Now if we zoom back to the face, you'll see it'll start to become clear and so forth. Now this actually works when recording as well. So again, if you're using manual focus lenses and you're trying to dial it in, this is a great tool for that use case. You can turn it on and off on the fly while recording. It's quite nice. Now below that we have subject detection. We talked about that in the previous video, but you can cycle through to dial in specific subjects if you want. I just have it set to auto right now though, so it'll pick up whatever subjects are in front of me. Now down below that is touch to track. You can change that in video mode to touch to focus as well as auto exposure, or you can just turn it off if you want. And then down here is the playback button as well. So on the bottom of the screen here, we have the shutter speed, we have the aperture, we have the ISO, and we have the white balance. That's what that stuff means. And again, in full auto mode, the camera is going to do like most of the work for you. So it's going to pick the white balance, it's going to pick the shutter speed, and it's going to pick the aperture when recording. So again, when I hit record, so it's going to automatically detect the subject, which is the human, and it's just going to track the subject automatically. Like you don't have to do anything just by default because subject detect is on. And you can see on the eye there, see on the eye of the subject how it's tracking it. So you don't even really have to worry about it. But if you want to change the focus, you could just touch around the screen. Check this out. If I move to the back, now it's tracking that fan back there. And if we move the camera, you can see how the tracking box is staying on the fan. So this is while recording video. So when you have the tracking box up like I have now on the fan in the background, if you want to cancel that, like if you want it to go back to normal where it'll just automatically detect the subjects, you can cancel the tracking, and just the center button here on the dial pad in the back is how you would go about canceling that. And now it just canceled tracking and it went back to the subject. So again, just to be clear, it's this button here in the middle of the dial. That's the set button we talked about earlier. That's how you cancel tracking. Now it's actually recording right now, so let me stop recording. And we're going to go into the menu here because I want to show you how to set up the frame rates and quality and stuff like that. So you got frame rates up here, but you really want to set your quality first. So let me just go back by hitting the menu button here. So we're going to want to set this first, like what actual file format you want. Now, out of the box, this came set up, I believe it was in SHD, like out of the box, just so you guys know. So I tend to use S4K or HS4K. Now, HS is a more compressed format, so it's a little bit more efficient because it takes up less space on the memory card. But when you're on your computer and you're editing, it takes a little bit more computer power to uncompress it. So S is a slightly larger file size, but it's a little bit easier on the computer because it's less compressed. Now SI is the best quality that the camera offers. So SI is going to be the largest file sizes, meaning it's going to have the most data and most quality potential, but it's also going to fill up the memory cards a lot faster. So that's what SI is. So if I just set it to SI for a second, and we go over here, see the quality there is set to 300 M 422 10-bit, and it's not letting me change it. Not available. So in this mode, it just automatically sets it. So now if I go to 60, you can see it's 600 M 422 10-bit. Which is a massive amount of file and data. So now if we go back to the format that I tend to use most, like this XAVS 4K, now we can go over to the right. Now we have options here. So we can select lower quality if we want. Now I always use the best quality, so I'm going to go 100 meg 422 10-bit. And then up here, if we change the frame rate, this is what I wanted to show you. If we go to like 30, for example, you're going to have to go back down here and dial in the record setting for that given frame rate. So I'm going to set that to the best quality, just like so. Matter of fact, I'm going to go to 60, and I'm going to go down here, and I'm going to set that to the best quality, just so it's ready to go. So when I change frame rates in the future, I don't have to do this anymore. And 120, I'm going to do the same thing there, and go up to 280 10-bit 422. So now in this file format XAVCS 4K, all my frame rates are set to the best quality. So I could just change them now and it will remember what quality I had it set at. So that's how the quality works in that regard. And I'm in the main area in the menu system right here, guys. So up here is the My Menu area. We got main. This is what it looks like. So now if we scroll over here, this stuff is referring to Gamma Display Assist and stuff, which more works with log shooting. We'll talk about that in a minute. But what I wanted to show you here was the auto noise reduction settings, because this stuff is on by default, Win Noise Reduction, internal mic. So you can actually turn this off or on, it's up to you. I have it set to auto, but there's a couple other options in here you can turn on and off. Noise cut, internal mic, another feature. Now, if you hit the garbage can, it'll explain what this does. Reduces constant background noise and lens power zoom sound while using the internal microphone. So if there's like a constant buzzing in the background or something like that, because you're in an industrial environment, things like that, and you're using the internal mic, this can be a helpful feature. So it is on by default, so I'm just going to shut it off though. And it also has this option for external mics as well, which is quite nice. Remember I showed you earlier, if you wanted to hook up an external mic like this MKE 400, it plugs in, so you can actually control this noise reduction stuff even if you're using an external mic, which is quite cool. So I'll just get the menu button to go back. Now this camera is capable of doing full frame 4K 60 and APS-C crop 4K 120. However, it does not work out of the box at full frame. So for example, if I put it in 60p mode right now, the camera actually cropped in a little bit. So if I go back out, put it on 24, you could see it's like wider. It actually cropped in when I put it in 4K 60. And this is supposed to record in 4K 60 full frame, and it does, but you have to change a feature in the menu. That's what I want to show you. So if you go into the menu here, and you go down to Image Record Settings, right here, Angle of View Priority. So because I'm in 24p, it's not working. I got to put it in 60p or 120p in order for this feature to be enabled. So let me go back to the main area, put this in 60, then we'll go back, and now notice how it's not grayed out. So now I can turn this on, and now you can see the crop. This is what it looked like a minute ago when I put it in 4K 60. With this on, it'll be full frame. So what it does is it actually turns off the noise reduction, and that will allow you to get full frame. So I don't really notice too much of a difference in noise, but if you're pushing higher ISOs and you're really pushing exposures, you are going to see a little bit more noise because the noise reduction in camera is now off in this mode. So I'm just going to click OK there. And now we have full frame 4K 60. And if I change the frame rate to 4K 120, which is awesome for slow motion, this is going to switch to crop mode, so it's APS-C mode, which means just that crop factor, Super 35 it's also called. So we get 4K 120 in that mode, and if I go to menu here, 4K angle of view priority, it's already set to on, so we're good there. If I turn that off, you could see how much it crops in 4K 120. So again, you really do want this feature on if you want the widest view possible and full frame in 4K 60. So that's what that does. And also note how the memory card time changed, because 4K 120 is such a high bit rate. Now I'm only going to get 24 minutes in 4K 120. Remember how that was like an hour and a half or whatever before? So like I said, it depends on what frame rate you're at and what quality you're set to as to how much time you're going to get on your memory card. So now if I put this in SI 4K, I just want to show you now, look, I'm going to get 11 minutes in 4K 60. 11 minutes, like that's it. So you're going to need massive memory cards and stuff like that if you're recording in these super heavy file formats. So just wanted to make you guys aware of that stuff if you're not sure how all this works. Now HD you also can use, and you get frame rates in HD. I could show you here. If you go into HD mode, you still have access to all these different frame rates, which is nice. Now, this camera actually does do HD 240, but that only works in S and Q mode. Now, I'm going to do another video on S and Q mode. It's not that advanced, but I don't want this video to be that long. So S and Q mode will be its own video, and I'll show you some nice time-lapse samples and some cool slow motion stuff. Like I said, if you don't need 4K and you want to just record in 1080, this is really high quality 1080. It's oversampled and all of that. You can do that here as well. So I'm just going to switch this back to 4KS though. All right, so I'm just going to put this back to 24. like so. And notice I'm at 100 megabit 422. It automatically went back to what I want there. So we're good to go. And now you can see I can record for 1 hour and 8 minutes. So what I wanted to show you here is the focus transition speed. So again, when I'm recording, if I go back there, it's focusing on the fan and then it's going back to the subject. That's the focus transition speed, how long that takes. So if I go into the menu here and I go to autofocus manual focus, you have autofocus transition speed right here. So it's set to 5 by default, but I could lower this down to like 2, for example. And you also have autofocus subject shift sensitivity. It's set to responsive right now. And you have AF assist. AF assist will allow you to actually turn the manual focus ring to switch the focus, and the autofocus will just pick up wherever you turn the ring to. It's an interesting feature. It is sometimes helpful, so I have that turned on as well. But anyways, watch when I show you this focus transition speed. Now I have it set to 2, so watch how much slower and smooth it is. See that? It's nice and cinematic. Now you might notice that there's a little bit of like a zooming effect. That's called focus breathing. Now, let me just go back in there and change the transition speed back to 5 because it's a little easier to see. That zooming effect. I can get this even closer. So you see how it looked like it zoomed out? And now it looks like it's zooming in, like as it gets closer to the subject. That's focus breathing. So this lens and this camera has focus breathing compensation. So if we go in here, and we go over and we go all the way down under image quality settings, we have lens compensation. So if we go over to the right, this is where we have lens compensation stuff. So distortion, I'm going to put that to auto. Breathing comp, I'm going to turn that on. Now, breathing comp does crop in a little bit because it has to compensate for that zooming effect. So now that focus breathing is on, I'm going to hit record on the screen this time. Now watch when I select the background. You see how there's no zooming? No zooming. So that's what focus breathing comp does. And that zooming is kind of distracting. You know, you don't really see that in movies and stuff because cinema lenses pretty much have very little focus breathing by design. It's one of the reasons those lenses are so huge. So that's what focus breathing does. It's a great tool. And if you're doing a lot of focus racking with products and things like that, it does look better with focus breathing compensation on to the human eye because the zooming, it just takes you out of it a little bit. Once you notice it, I honestly didn't notice this stuff at first until I learned it, years ago. But it's just one of those things, and that's a good use case for as why you would want to use that. But again, it does crop in a little bit, so you are losing a little bit of that field of view, just to let you know. It crops in like maybe 10% or something like that. It depends on the lens, how much it actually crops in, because each lens's focus breathing characteristics are different. And not all lenses have focus breathing support, by the way, but a lot of the newer lenses do, like the G lenses, the GM lenses and stuff. Third-party lenses are not going to have focus breathing support. They're not going to have distortion comp support, I don't think. It's possible that they will, but I don't think so. All right, so one other option we have in here is zebras. You can turn zebras on, and that will help with exposure. So right now it's set to like 70, which is pretty good for like skin tones and stuff. And you can see how like the zebras are on the skin of the subject here, like letting you know the exposure is pretty good. But zebras are great. You can actually set the value of zebras. If you go over to the right here, you can see it's set to 70. You could set the value and change it. So like just highlights will show up, like you see it on the highlights of the face right there. So this is great if you want to make sure that you're not clipping the highlights, or if you want to get like skin tone exposure accuracy and things like that. You can also use it for shadows, and you can actually customize this as well. You have C1, and then you can set your ranges and stuff like that. Zebras are very powerful. It's a super helpful tool when you're trying to set the exposure when using S-Log, when log shooting and stuff like that. So that's what zebras do. So by default, this is how they have it set. And that's in the function menu. I'm just going to turn it off. So now if we switch into program auto mode, we're going to get a bunch more features here, just like we did in photo mode. So now if we go over here, we have the creative looks, and you guys can use the creative looks when recording video, which is pretty fun and awesome. So if you want to record some nice high contrast black and white footage, you can set it right here, and right in camera you're going to get that, so you don't have to worry about the post-processing and stuff. And we got sepia. Again, all these different creative modes are available, and they do work in video. Now we also have picture profiles right here, PP. See that? That stands for picture profiles. Now if you go down and then there's an arrow to the right, that will explain what the profile is, and you can actually go in here and change these settings if you want. So this is customizable depending on what you want to do. But I wanted to show you down here, PP10 is HLG. So that's hybrid log gamma shooting, and that's where that is. Then PP11 is S-Cinetone. So S-Cinetone is a really nice, fun profile to use. It mutes the colors a little bit, has like a look to it that Sony's kind of known for, but that's where S-Cinetone is. So if you want to shoot in S-Cinetone, you can set it right there. What's also nice about S-Cinetone is you can have the ISO like wherever you want. You can also do it with flexible ISO and S-Log, but in S-Log you really do want to have it at the base ISO, and for this camera it's 808,000. We'll talk about that in a second. So again, that's picture profiles. And then if you go down, this is where you can import user LUTs. And you can just copy them to the memory card and import them into the camera, and then they'll be available. So I'm just going to turn that off for now. So now if we go back into the menu here, and we go up to the main area, I just want to show you, if we go to main 2, this is where log shooting is. So if we go in there, we can enable log shooting, flexible ISO. And you got your color gamut here. This is the one I like to use. And we have the embed LUT file, which is on by default. So that's fine. I'll show you that in a moment. And then just so you guys are aware, we have other options like focus area. We already talked about. You can change your focus areas to help dial in the focus, to a specific location if you need to. Wide is using the entire screen. Now we also have stabilization options here. It's set to standard right now, but you can go to active and then dynamic active. So let me just show you that from the function menu. Right here is the stabilization option as well. And here's active. You see how it crops in a little bit? And here's dynamic active, so that crops in even more. But this stabilization works so good. Dynamic active is made for like walking and hand holding. Active is also made for hand holding and stuff, but when you're walking, it's not quite enough. I mean, it is if you're like, trying to get it like a little smoother. And then standard is just the sensor stabilization. So active is sensor plus digital, and then dynamic active is like hardcore digital and also the sensor. So that's what the stabilization modes do. And then you could turn it off if you're on a tripod or something. You don't really need stabilization on. So again, this is where the LUT is. We talked about that a second ago. So the LUT is actually Rec 709 is what it uses by default. And that'll basically make the footage look like what it normally looks like when you're shooting JPEG. You know what I mean? Like the colors and the contrast, it like simulates it. So again, this is what log looks like right now. I'm in log format. So you can see it's definitely a lot flatter than it was when we weren't in log. So if I go back into the menu here and turn the LUT off, now you can see it's crazy flat looking. And this is why it's a little bit hard to expose when you're using S-Log, because it's hard to tell. It's like, am I underexposed? Am I overexposed? So what you can do is you can hit the display button and bring up the histogram, and that'll let you know that the shadows are not clipping and the highlights are not clipping. And if we want to adjust that, we can use the exposure comp here in program auto mode, and you can go to like +1 if you wanted to, and you can see the histogram there. So you can adjust your exposure using the exposure comp when in program auto mode. So let's just put this LUT back on so you can see what that looks like with the LUT on there. And now if we go into the menu here and we go to main 2, I can turn log shooting off, and now you can see it's quite a bit underexposed, but it's going to compensate. There it goes. It's good to go now. And now you can see how punchy and stuff the colors are. This is kind of like Rec 709, but we're in standard picture profile. So, but that's what Rec 709 is. It tries to make the log footage look a little bit more like this, so it's a little easier to see what you're doing. So now again, if we go back into log shooting and we turn this on, what you're going to want to have your ISO set for, ideally when shooting log, is the base ISOs. So it is an auto ISO, but we can set that. And you notice how it's gray? So ISO, and you can see there's lines under the ISO, but as soon as we get to 800, there's no lines. That's because that's the first base ISO. So when shooting log, you really want to be in the base ISO ideally. You don't have to be, but that's the optimal place to be. So if I were recording, for example, I wouldn't be in P mode, I would be in aperture priority mode. So if I was shooting at f1.8 and I'm at ISO 800, look at where my shutter speed's at. It's at 1:320. So guys, if you're not aware, when recording video, there is such a thing as like an ideal shutter speed. So ideally, you want the shutter speed to be double the frame rate. So I'm recording at 24p. So I really want that frame rate to be, 1/50th of a second or 1/48th of a second ideally. And right now it's at 1:320. And remember how I said you want to use the base ISO. So I can't change that. That's like a fixed number. The other base ISO, by the way, if you're doing serious hardcore low light shooting, is 8,000. My only option in this scenario would be to raise the aperture to get this down to 1/50th of a second or 1/48th of a second. See right there? Like that's pretty close, so that's how you would go about dialing it in. But if I want to be at f1.8, like how am I supposed to do that? Like that's where the ND filters come in. And let me just show you really quick how this works. So you might wonder when people are shooting outside why they always have glass on the front of the lens that looks like glasses. It's called tinted glass, and it's called an ND filter. So this is an ND filter. And when you turn it, it gets lighter and darker. So you can see now it's like clear or a little bit clear, but if you turn it, see how it gets darker? So that's how you fix this shutter speed problem with a tool like this variable ND filter. So let me just screw this on real quick and show you how it works. So now watch my shutter speed change. So we want that at about 1/50th of a second right there. So that's where we want to be when recording at f1.8. You could see the exposure comp is at 0, which is where we want it to be, and this looks like a pretty good exposure. But again, because we're shooting log, it's a little bit harder to tell. So, you can raise the exposure comp a little bit if you think it's underexposed. So again, you could basically use the variable ND filter to dial in your exposure. Now this makes a little bit more sense when in manual mode, which is how I have my studio camera set up and everything. So in manual mode, everything is like a hard set number. So you can see now the meter is telling you we're at -1.7. So I could turn this ND filter, open it up to get that meter at 0, like so. And now we just have to dial in the shutter speed. So we don't want to change the ISO. We don't want to change the aperture. We want to change the shutter speed. So let's put that at 1/48th of a second, which is where we want it. Now you can see the meter says we're at +1. So let's get that meter down to 0 or wherever you want it. You might want it a little bit high, like you might want it at +3. Like in my studio, for example, I have it at +0.3 to +0.7. So it's slightly overexposed in my studio. It just depends on what look you're going for. So somewhere right around here is where I would have it for this particular setup. So again, this is not achievable without a variable ND filter. Remember, the only other option would be to lower the ISO, which you can do. But again, ideally, if you want to be like, a professional and have everything set how you're supposed to, you want to use the base ISO and then control your exposure with the ND. Now, obviously, that's easier said than done. If you're running and gunning, that's going to be a lot harder. You're going to have to constantly change the ND filter. So you can just let the shutter speed float, like if I was using aperture priority mode earlier, and that will just let the shutter speed float around. A lot of times, that's how I shoot. Like I'm in the field and I'm holding the camera up, recording or whatever. If I don't have an ND filter with me, it's not the end of the world. The footage still looks fine, but a proper shutter speed, you can notice, like if you have a fast shutter speed, it will look a little bit jittery when stuff's moving. Like if a car is going past, it will have like a slight jitter to it as opposed to motion blur, which is what the human eye is used to seeing, which is ultimately why you want to have the proper shutter speed for each frame rate. So if we're recording in 4K 60, we're going to want the shutter speed at 1 1/20th of a second. If we're recording in 4K 120, we're going to want the shutter speed at 1/240, right? So we want to double the frame rate. That's how that works. So just keep that in mind, and keep in mind why variable ND filters are so useful. They're very helpful when you want to shoot wide open in bright conditions, because it's a lot of light coming in. And then again, in S-Log, it's pushing you to that 800 base ISO. So you're absolutely going to need an ND filter. f1.8 at ISO 800 is going to be blown out outside, you know, in bright conditions for sure. So you got to put some sunglasses on the lens and you'll be all set. Let me just take this off. By the way, this is a Nisi ND filter. It's a really high quality one. I highly recommend it. It's the True Color, so they're a little bit expensive, but they look awesome. And there's like no color shifting with the sky and the skin tones. All right, so in the menu here, I just wanted to show you a couple of other things that are helpful that I didn't cover quite yet. So right here we have soft skin effect. You have to have it set to human in order for this to work. When it's on auto, it doesn't work. But soft skin is a cool feature if you want to look like a little younger. So that's where this is. But remember, the subject detect has to be set to human for this not to be grayed out. That's why it's grayed out right now. Now we also have a feature here called peaking. So peaking display works kind of similar to what I showed you before with focus map, but it works in a different way. Let me show you how it works. So I'm just going to change the color to blue so it's a little easier to see. Actually, let me change it to yellow, and we'll leave it on middle. So now I have focus peaking turned on, and you'll see it light up on the edge of the subject. So I don't know if you guys can see that, how clearly. Let me switch off log shooting so it's a little easier to see. And I'll just put this back to aperture priority mode so the exposure is more correct. All right, so now you could see that yellow. See it showing up? You could see it on the subject there. If I go back into the menu here, put it on high. So now you can see a little more on the eyes. You see that? That's focus peaking. So it's super helpful. So when you're recording video, you can use the focus peaking to nail the focus. Like watch, when it goes to the fan in the back, like right there, I know the focus is on the fan and I'm using manual focus. So you could literally rack the focus fairly smooth using manual, and then right when it gets to the eyes, you're good to go. So that's powerful if you want to use manual focus and stuff. And I use this all the time. When I'm like recording, let me just stop recording. When I'm recording on the camera slider, let me show you a clip of the A7V on a camera slider. So I was actually racking the focus while recording that using my Voigtlander lens here. This is one of my favorite lenses that I use a lot for product photography and video and stuff. And it has a very long focus throw. As you can see here, it's like so many threads. This thing grows. It's an amazing lens. I did a long-term review on this lens as well. It's unbelievably high quality. But anyways, focus peaking makes it so easy to do that focus rack, like while on a slider is how I was doing that. And if you can use autofocus as well and just slow the transition speed down, which is how I used to do it, but sometimes it picks the wrong thing, like when you're moving on a slider and stuff. And it's just nice to have that precision control, and focus peaking makes it really easy. So I highly recommend checking this out if you're doing any kind of stuff like that. It'll make your life a lot easier. So I'm just turned that off there. So another thing I wanted to show you guys is this emphasized record display and grid display. So the emphasized record display, if we turn that on and we hit record, we get this nice red box. I really like that. So I like having that on. It's easier to see than just the REC on the top of the screen. So I recommend turning that on. Now grid line is the other thing I wanted to show you. I also recommend turning this on, and you can change which kind of grid you have. But you see like the lines showing up on the screen? These are the different grid options. So I like rule of thirds is what I usually use, which is this one right here. Very helpful for framing, rule of thirds. Help you get your subject centered and the horizons level and stuff like that. You can see on the desk how you could use the grid to line it up, you know, just to make sure it's nice and even sort of thing. All right, so I just want to show you framing stabilizer real quick here in the studio. So I have it set up here framing stabilizer. You can see right here, it's under image stabilization towards the bottom. This is similar to auto framing, kinda, but different. So if we go in here, we have an option for off and then center. And notice we can go over to the right and change it to manual as well. I'll show you that in a second. But anyways, when you put it on, just look at how much it crops in. That's how this feature is working. So it's cropping in, kind of similar to auto framing, and then it's going to actually try to keep our subject in the center. So watch when I hit the OK button. This little menu comes up and it tells us as soon as you start tracking the subject, it'll go to the center and it'll stay there. So I'm just going to click OK. And now there's our scene. Now watch when I touch the subject, when I start tracking. See how the subject went to the center? So now, when I move the camera, the subject's going to stay in the center. That's what this does. It stabilizes the frame. So basically, this is the frame we want when we're recording, and no matter how we move the camera, like if I move the camera around, right? Like say I'm in a car and I'm trying to follow, you know, the subject riding a bicycle, a BMX bike or something like that. Look at how much the camera is moving, and the subject is staying pretty much in the center. This is how that works, and it's absolutely incredible for certain use cases. You know, again, if you're in a car and you're tracking something and you're moving because of just the camera itself is moving, framing stabilizer would be a very helpful feature in that regard. So I just hit the center button here on the back directional pad, and that canceled tracking. See how it says touch the subject and it'll start tracking again? So I'm just going to go to the menu, go back in here, and I'm going to set it to manual this time. And now it's letting us know there's a little icon on there, and once we start tracking, we can select that icon and then lock it where we want it. So what that means is, so for example, I could start tracking this subject. So now it's on the face, and I could put the subject right over here to the rule of thirds. Let's say right about there, and then I'll hit this lock button. Now the composition is locked. So if I move the frame around, it's going to keep the subject there. I mean, to a limit, you can only move so much, you know, and it's only so fast to respond. But you can see how incredible that works. It's a very cool feature. And again, it kind of gives you that cameraman feel, how it moves. So that's what framing stabilizer does. So I'm just going to go into the menu here and turn that off. So let me show you how auto framing works, which is very similar. So here's auto framing. And you have a couple of options here, just so you guys know. You have framing track speed. So that's how fast is the cameraman simulation going to move. You might want to have that higher or lower, depending on what you're doing. And you can also decide whether it does it for show or not. So you can have it not crop, like over the HDMI, just as an example. But anyways, up here, you also have crop level. So you can crop in a large crop, which will go all the way to the head, medium, or a small crop. So let's just do a small crop this time. Just got to turn it on here. Auto framing on. All right, so that's a small crop. And I also have the subject detection set to auto. You need to have that hard set to human for this to work. So there we go. So now we're hard set to human, and you can see how that box came up. Now it's only cropping a little bit. So let me change that to crop in more. All right, there we go. See how much that zooms in? Now watch when the subject moves. This is the cameraman. And if you move quickly, it'll catch up. So this works amazing. And you can see how when it gets closer, it'll like use the whole frame. So that's like zooming out. And then this would be zooming in. Like if you're watching this on a recording, this would be zooming in. And it only goes so far because it needs to maintain 4K and stuff. But that's how auto framing works. And I can show you an example of me on the bridge. If you watch my A7V review, there's an example of me on the bridge actually using this feature, showing it off. So it's pretty cool how it works in the real world. Great for like any kind of demonstration where you're walking around like a little bit, you know, like in a workshop or something like that. If you're cooking, a lot of different scenarios where I could see using this. I use it when I'm like demoing lenses and stuff and I want like a cameraman following me. So I've used it at the Basher Kill when I'm recording dragonflies and stuff. It's a lot of fun. So if I just go back in the menu here, I'm just going to turn auto framing off. So one other thing I wanted to show you guys is the NTSC versus PAL Selector. So what this does is it'll change your frame rates. So if you're in Europe, for example, you use a different frame rate like format than we do in the United States or North America. So for example, we have 24p, you guys use 25p. We have 60p, you guys use 50p. And then 120p, you guys use 100. So the formats are different, like depending on where you live in the world. So if you lived in like France or something like that, and you bought this camera, it would be set to PAL mode, I believe, by default. My camera is NTSC by default because, you know, I got it in the United States or North America. And so that's what that does. So if your frame rates are different than mine, you know, you got the 50, the 25, and so forth, that's because you have a PAL camera. Everything pretty much works the same though. It's just the frame rate numbers are a little bit different. So keep that in mind. You're still gonna want to double the frame rate when recording video and all that, rule of thumb, but that's how that works. So if we go up here to shooting mode and we go over to the right, see how we have exposure control type? We can actually change this to flexible exposure mode. And what that's telling you is it's going to assign these custom buttons automatically. So you can basically set the camera up for shutter priority mode, aperture priority mode, full-fledged program auto mode, or full-fledged manual mode, depending on how you have it set. That's what this does. So let me show you how that works. If I go to OK here, let me just put the camera in manual mode here. So pretty much if I hold down, it assigns C2, C1, and C4. So if I hold C4 down, you could see now the shutter speed just went to auto. It has a little A there, right? So basically at this point, I'm kind of in aperture priority mode because the shutter is doing automatic. So now if I hold down the C1 button, now auto ISO is enabled. So now it's just in aperture priority mode with auto ISO. So that's how that works. Now, if I hold the C2 button down, now the aperture is also in auto. So we have auto ISO, auto aperture, and auto shutter speed. So that's basically like having the camera in program auto mode. It's doing like all the thinking for you. So that's how this flexible mode works. So it's pretty cool. So for example, if I want to hard set the shutter speed, I could hold down C4. Now the shutter is unlocked. I can set that to 1/50th of a second. And the aperture and the ISO, I don't have to worry about those settings. They'll automatically change depending on the exposure environment, but my shutter speed will stay at 1/50th, you know, for recording in 4K 24, just as an example. So, and again, you can hold down the C2 button here to unlock aperture. So now I can change the aperture and I can change the shutter speed, kind of like in manual mode. So we're still in auto for ISO. So for that, we have to hold the C1 button down. And now that cleared. So now we're in full-fledged manual mode, and now you can see the exposure comp in the center here switch to the meter, just like it did in full-fledged manual mode. So that's how it works. That's how this camera works in flexible exposure mode, which is very cool. And it's a great feature. I really haven't used it that much, but once I started using it and realized how it works, I actually really like it. So you just have to remember that these custom buttons are what locks and unlocks, you know, each exposure tool, right? Because you got shutter speed, aperture, and ISO are your 3 exposure tools there. So that's how that mode works. Now, just quick rule of thumb, if you want to record in 4K 120, that's great for slowing the footage down in post-processing for slow motion video. 4K 60 is also great for slowing down. It doesn't slow down as much as 4K 120, of course, but it's nice to slow it down a little bit, and it looks great for, it just depends on what you're doing, like just the trees with the wind. 4K 60 works great. Real estate shooters that are filming homes in real estate, they like that buttery footage in the real estate videos and stuff. A lot of people shoot in 4K 60 when doing real estate, and then you can slow that footage down that little bit, and it just helps smooth things out. So the higher frame rates also kind of give you more stabilization because you're slowing the frame rate down. So if the camera moves, that movement is now slower. So it actually makes the footage look a lot smoother at the higher frame rates when slowed down. So that is pretty much all I got for video at this time. So if I missed anything, I apologize. We are going to cover many more topics on the Sony A7V, so please stay tuned for more videos upcoming shortly. All right, guys, I'll catch up with you next time. Be sure to give me a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button for more videos on the A7V.